Hey everybody, I'm coming to you from southwest Pennsylvania today along US Route 40, about an hour or so east of the city of Pittsburgh. It was here in late June of 1755 that the largest army ever assembled on the North American continent to that point in history marched down this road behind me. It was a 2,400 man army under 60-year-old Major General Edward Braddock, who was the British overall commander in North America in the early stages of the French and Indian War. And he was marching this 2,400 man army, which included 400 colonial militia, some of whom were under the command of Lieutenant Colonel George Washington. They were under orders to take Fort Duquesne, which is modern-day Pittsburgh, at the Three Rivers there where they connect, which was under command of a group of French soldiers, just a few hundred French soldiers along with some Indians. Well, they got about 10 miles away from Fort Duquesne down this road when they were ambushed by that much smaller force of French and Indians, but they were taken by surprise, and it was the lead element with about 1,400 men under Colonel Braddock, along with under General Braddock, along with Colonel Washington, and another colonel who was a part of the command that day, Thomas Gage, who eventually would be the British commander in Boston, facing off against George Washington in 1775. Well, about 900 of those 1,400 lead elements of the British were casualties that day. It was a disaster, a complete disaster. Major General Braddock was shot in the chest and mortally wounded, and they eventually, under Colonel Washington, made a retreat and were able to get out of there with General Braddock, and they made their way back east toward this location, which was very near to a British fort that had been destroyed the year before called Fort Necessity. So on July 13th of 1755, as the remnants of the British Army retreated from the debacle at the Battle of the Monongahela with their mortally wounded commanding officer, General Braddock, along with them, they got here very near to the previous site where George Washington had built Fort Necessity, about a mile away from here. And it was here that General Braddock died, and his men buried him in the middle of the road. I'm standing and I can turn around and show you. You can see this was the road that existed that went to Fort Duquesne, to modern day Pittsburgh. And because they were concerned that the Indians might dig up and desecrate, and the French might dig up and desecrate the grave, Washington made the decision that they would bury General Braddock in the middle of the road with the hopes that the grave would not be noticed or disturbed. And so in a ceremony presided over by Colonel Washington, they buried General Braddock here. And you can see that there's a marker that indicates the original site of the burial. His grave was not disturbed that we know of until 1804, when remnants of the general's uniform along with parts of his skeleton were found, and they began to be hauled off by souvenir hunters. Eventually an effort was made to identify the general's body. They found it. They took it up the hill behind me here, and they reburied him next to what is now the modern US Route 40. And they had another ceremony, reburied him, and in the 1900s, I think 1913, they placed a large marker that exists today, and we'll take a look at that. So one interesting footnote to this story that I discovered in doing my research before I came here today, you can see the present location of General Braddock's grave behind me, and you can hear the sounds from US Route 40. In the middle part of the 20th century, an alternate account of what happened to General Braddock emerged. The historical account says that after several hours of fierce fighting, General Braddock was shot in the chest by the French and Indians that had ambushed his troops. But an alternate account came about in the middle of the 20th century, which stated that he was actually killed by one of his own men, one of the colonial militia, a young man in his early 20s from Virginia by the name of Benjamin Bowling, who happened to be, I believe, a third great-grandson of Pocahontas. Benjamin Bowling claimed, and the story was passed down through his family, that General Braddock was using the colonial militia as cannon fodder to take fire instead of his British regulars, so that they would not take as many casualties. And so in an effort to save his fellow colonial militia, Benjamin Bowling had fired the fatal shot that had mortally wounded General Braddock. And after that, Colonel Washington was able to organize the retreat and get everybody out of there. Now, the first time that appeared was in a number of newspapers back in the 1950s and 1960s, so I tend to doubt it. But I'm okay with believing it's possible because it makes for interesting intrigue. And also, Benjamin Bowling is my 7th great-grandfather. So I thought that was a very interesting story. He came from the Bowling family, which among its descendants includes a First Lady. The First Lady who was married to Woodrow Wilson. She was descended from Benjamin Bowling's brother, John. So whether it's true or not, hard to say. Probably isn't. But it at least is family lore in my family that is what happened. You can judge for yourself whether that's true. Thanks for watching.